of City Council for Monday, February 8th to order. And our first order of business this morning is our proclamations. And obviously in our environment today with, we're not able to have guests into City Hall. We're going to do the proclamation and we'll make sure that they get to the appropriate organizations. And this morning our first proclamation is for the Chamber of Commerce Week in Dawson Creek. And so I'm going to stand up and we'll read the proclamation. Whereas the Dawson Creek Chamber of Commerce is a volunteer business organization working together to achieve a better quality of life, support business and the local economy, and to build a strong community. And whereas Chamber Week brings awareness to the important work these organizations do to stimulate local economies, promote their community, and engage in multi-level advocacy which benefits the entire province. As the key representatives of their business community to government, chambers actively listen to business needs and continually articulate them to government at all levels. And whereas chambers of commerce support business through benefit programs, services, and education, being a community-based means that chambers are funded entirely by their members, events, and sponsorship. This community investment is what drives the chambers of commerce to directly support and stimulate local economies and work collaboratively to create vibrant communities around the province. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim February 15th to 19th as Chamber of Commerce Week in Dawson Creek. And obviously the work that the Dawson Creek and Dawson Creek Chamber of Commerce does has been really amazing over the number of years. And so we'll ensure that we get the proclamation to Chris Richards as the president of the local Chamber of Commerce, as well as to Kathleen, the executive director, and pass on our appreciation for their support to the community. Our next proclamation this morning is for the BC Women's Institute Month, and it's always a real pleasure to welcome Ruth and the ladies who work on behalf of this long-standing organization, certainly in the Peace River region, but also across the province. Whereas the British Columbia Women's Institute is a diversified group of interested, involved, and educated women from all walks of life who, by working together, expand their skills, broaden their interests, and work to improve the conditions in the home, the community, and around the world through service, self-fulfillment, and sociability. And whereas they sponsor and promote programs in agriculture, citizenship, home economics, health and welfare, and cultural pursuits. And whereas they function at the local, regional, provincial, and national and international level with a range of activities broad enough to encompass the interests of women, now therefore I do hereby proclaim the month of February 2021 as BC Women's Institute Month in Dawson Creek. And again, we'll make sure to get this to the Ruth Weiner and the BC Women's Institute and ensure that we pass along our appreciation for the long-standing work that they've done for our community and region. And now the next delegation this morning, we have the presentation for the kindness meters. And the kindness meters were really an initiative that kind of popped up about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago as a result of a message I got from a local lady through Bob Zimmer, and she was from Nova Scotia, and this kindness meter program was out in Truro, Nova Scotia, where they had installed some meters, so parking meters in front of the, I think, Tim Hortons and a couple other locations, and the money collected in there were given to the community organizations looking to do fundraising. And so we approached TransCanada at the time, TC Energy, and suggested that we would really like to explore the opportunity of this kindness meter program for our community. And we went to work and got Kevin to find us some old meters, and we refurbished them and have 4 of them that are set up in the community. And TC Energy gave us a donation at that time, I think, of $10,000. And so any money that we collect through the meters in the course of the year then are matched by that funds that TC Energy have put into the kindness meter program, and it's benefited a ton of communities or community organizations. They're located in 4 locations in the city at the Kamboric Aquatic Center, at the Calvin Crook Center, the Memorial Arena, and at the corner of the Chamber of Commerce by the Mile Zero post. I think we have Heather is joining us today, this morning, virtually to help us present the checks for 2020. And we'll just wait to see if we can. There she is. Good morning, Heather. Welcome. And we also, I think, have the organizations from this year's recipients of the funds is the Dawson Creek Society for Community Living and Literacy now. I think Michelle Mobley and Kristen Homey. Kirsten are going to be joining us as well.
Kirsten's here, yeah.
So we will proceed, and Heather, I just gave a quick overview of the TransCanada Kindness Meter program for our community, and this year, because of obviously COVID, the Memorial Arena, the pool were closed down for a good portion of the year, and so normally that matching amount, this year TC have agreed to double that amount. And so there was about $180 donated by residents this year in the program, so that we'll be presenting $359 to the Dawson Creek Society for Community Living, and $359, I guess, for Literacy Now. And Heather, good morning. I'll just pass it over to you if you want to say a few words.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I realize not in a traditional format. I'm comfortable in the warmth of my home this morning because it's a little chilly here in the piece, but congratulations to the recipients this morning, and thank you for your unwavering efforts and program support, really particularly in a time where communities were seeing it need it most. Whether it's partnering with community groups or supporting local initiatives, our goal is to really support and build that sustainability piece and support the development of vibrant communities where we all work, live, and operate. Really, as we plan and construct to operate our growth with infrastructure assets, specifically in the Peace River Regional District, TC Energy we remain committed to investing in initiatives like the kindness meters that enable communities like the city of Dawson Creek to thrive. So absolutely looking forward to another successful year in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. And obviously we appreciate all of the support TC Energy have given to the community over the years, and this is just one more example of that. Kirsten, good morning.
Good morning.
So thank you for joining us this morning, and it's our pleasure to advise that there was a total of $540 raised, so approximately $270 will be provided to the Dawson Creek Society for Community Living, and we really appreciate you joining us this morning.
Yeah, and thank you guys for thinking of us. We've got lots of uses for the money, so it's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Stay warm. And with that, we now have the pleasure of drawing 2021's groups, and so this year it will be the South Peace Hospice Palliative Care Society, and the Kiwanis Child Care Center. So congratulations. We'll notify the groups, and we'll go to work. Hopefully this year we'll see a little more activity in the facilities and raise a little bit more money. Thank you, Heather and Kirsten. Have a great week and stay warm.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Yes, thanks, you too.
So thank you. Now we'll move on to new councillor business. Councillor Wilbur, just let me get onto my screen here.
There we go.
I just want to mention that I had attended the resource forum, so I was fortunate to be able to do that through work and introduce some of those people that were there to some of the people in Dawson Creek providing services around work experience. And I just want to congratulate the organizers on a really great virtual forum. And it was great to hear some of the struggles, but also the optimism moving forward. So I was fortunate to have that opportunity. So congratulations again to those that organized it.
Thank you, Councillor, and appreciate you attending. Other councillor business? Okay, we'll move to minutes. 4.1, we have the minutes of our special meeting of council for January 18th for adoption. Moved. Councillor Dober, second. Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And the minutes of our regular meeting of with Committee of the Whole Council of January 25th for adoption. Councillor Dober, Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And minutes of our special meeting of council for January 29th for adoption. Councillor Wilbur, second. Councillor Earl. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Is there any errors or omissions of the minutes for anybody? And business arising. Anybody have any items out of the minutes? Thank you. Item 6 is correspondence. So we have a letter from Dale Campbell, president of the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society, regarding our request for a letter of support to NDIT. Councillor Earl, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry, I just...
Good to go?
Yep.
Good. Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the City of Dawson Creek support the South Peace Mile Zero Park Society's request. Do you want me to read the resolution?
Yes, please.
Okay, I move that the City of Dawson Creek Council supports the grant application to the NDIT Cultural Infrastructure Program for the Sedaton Hall project with an estimated project budget of $68,100. Further, that is, the city had originally budgeted $40,000 for the reduced scope, including weeping tile and exterior painting, that the city commits to providing 30% of the increased scope, which includes additional interior painting up to a maximum of $40,000. And further, that although the lease agreement between the City of Dawson Creek and the Mile Zero Park Society is currently on a month-to-month basis, Council confirms commitment to a 5-year lease agreement once negotiations on the new agreement are complete.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Javetkov, discussion? You ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. 6.2, we have a letter from Arden Smith, Department Manager at the South Peace Community Resources Society, regarding the new Supportive Housing Advisory Committee they're getting set up. Councillor Javetkov.
I'll move that we provide the letter of support.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Earl. And on this, they've got an initial meeting set up for February 22nd. I responded to Arden that I will represent the city for that initial meeting and then bring it back to council with the results of that. Councillor Earl's indicated he is willing to represent the city on that committee, and so I'll bring that back to council at our next meeting, and we'll formalize that at the next meeting after February 22nd. Any further discussion? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. 6.3, we have a letter from Brian Bettis, General Manager of TELUS, regarding a universal broadband fund they want to put in an application for service to the city of Dawson Creek. Councillor Javetkov.
I'll move that we provide a letter of support to TELUS.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Earl. Blair, do you want to just give a...
Thank you, Your Worship. This is quite standard practice for, I'll use telecommunication companies, for example. There will be one forthcoming, I believe, soon from Shaw as well for a different issues they would like to look at expanding. But what they do is when they come into a community, look at enhancing services, there may be additional need for towers and different things. They work with the community, whether it be city property, private property. But any time they would like to enhance their service, I think it's a good thing for the community as well as the region. So.
Thank you. We, a number of years ago, we provided Shaw with the access to our city infrastructure to install I think the boosters or whatever to provide a Wi-Fi service in the community. And so when we allowed that at no cost to them, I think, and certainly we didn't receive any revenue for access to the poles downtown and stuff like that. And so now when you go on your phone or a wireless device, it shows Shaw Open, and that's for Shaw customers who can sign into it. So if you're not a Shaw customer, you don't have access to that. And so that was a real good kind of learning. Certainly the RD at the Peace River Regional District, we're doing some work in regards to that rural connectivity and wireless. We've got a fiber working group going on. So at some point, I think it would be worthwhile for us as Shaw and TELUS are looking at broadening coverage and service in the community and region, that we should have them come in and give us an update on what the service means and what the expansion of availability of service is, just so that we have a better understanding when we're partnering with them, giving them access to our infrastructure, that we make sure that it's the best for the community. And certainly in this case, it's expanding service in there for us on the LTE. So I got absolutely no issue. But I just think for the future, we should be inviting them in as they're broadening coverage to make sure we make and give the best decisions and information for our community and our residents. Any further discussion? Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, I appreciated what you said because it reminds me of my deep frustration when trying to use internet in Dawson Creek, that I'm prevented, it seems, from, or I mean, that may be an incorrect statement, but I'm frustrated in accessing my normal connectivity, which is through TELUS. And so I want to make sure that we have a seamless regime in place. I got constantly frustrated. And also when I'm now at some location I go to quite regularly, the same thing happens with TELUS, that whilst being a TELUS customer, I'm pushed onto some TELUS regime that gives me very, very poor service. So I may be displaying my ignorance about technology here, but I don't think I'm a slouch in that. I think I'm fairly up to date. So I'm hoping that we can have something that doesn't frustrate users like myself.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that whole part about when they provide and come in and provide service. They got Shaw got $21 million as a grant from, I think, the province and feds to provide that highway and drop fiber from Dawson Creek to Prince George to Dawson Creek. But what that doesn't do is it still doesn't give, and the implication was that it was going to broaden coverage for and access to coverage, but it doesn't, and so it's only for their customers. So anyway, I think it's just a really important conversation for us to have to ensure that we leverage that. Councillor Wilbur?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what this service will be. I do know that TELUS does provide phones to youth who are moving out of ministry care to keep them connected. And I also know that TELUS provides low-income internet service. So I'm hoping that the outcome of this will be better service for those most vulnerable in our community.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Reports. We have report 7.1. We have report number 21021 from the city planner regarding a development variance permit for 2101 for Pat Rorison. And it's reconsideration of the development variance permit from 19-04C. Councillor Javetkov. Councillor Parslow.
I'd like to move the recommendation that report number 21-021, redevelopment variance permit 21-01, Pat Orson be received. Further, development variance permit 21-01 be approved subject to a successful notification period.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Javetkov?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Discussion? Councillor Dober?
Thank you, Worship. Can I talk now?
Yep, you're
Okay.
live.
I just had a few things around it. Like, is this, because it says in here that he's developing 21 lots this year. So is this sidewalk where those 21 lots are being developed? So is it causing issues if he develops a sidewalk and then has to develop the lots?
Kevin?
So through your worship, the sidewalk that is mentioned in here is actually a connectivity piece through the existing subdivision, all the way from 17th Street to this new area that he's going to be developing. Within the area that he's developing this year, there will be sidewalks internally. But like I said, the one that's mentioned in this permit is just to connect the new area all the way out to 17th, where we have the infrastructure, sidewalk infrastructure as well.
Is there already houses on that, like where, like it's already developed?
Yeah, so they'll have to work around that existing, infrastructure and homes, driveways and whatnot, but there was a commitment to do so.
Your Worship, I have one more. Okay. Just one more question. I don't know a whole lot of history on this because I'm new to this, but it's kind of my understanding that this has been done a few times before. And my concern is that we put it off for another year, and then we put it off for another year, and it doesn't get done. And it's a commitment to the development up there, so I'm just wanting a little bit of clarification on the history of it.
So, through your worship, there is quite a bit of history. Really, in short, what this particular variance is about is the remainder of that subdivision up there that Mr. Rorson started and then paused on, and then during that pause, there was a change in our bylaws. And so the new bylaws required some new infrastructure items. So Mr. Rorson came to council back in 19, I guess it was, looking to complete, but not looking to vary the requirements so he could stay within what he developed the rest of the subdivision under. And so we went through a process variance, we went back and forth on a number of items, and essentially we landed on what you see in front of us, except for the timelines. Mr. Rorson's indicated that he wants to complete that remaining area as we've agreed, council's agreed to. It's just the timing now because of the market and COVID is kind of paused things or put things, a bit behind. So he's just wanting to delay those completion periods.
Thank you. So I guess the one thing just about that sidewalk, so did COVID, like in, the pandemic that's going on right now, has it created, I guess, the request for this? Or is it just, like, I'm not quite understanding why the request isn't. So,
Yeah, so through your worship, as I understand it, it's simply been that the market isn't there to market new lots. And so Mr. Rorson is asking to delay the expense of the sidewalk until I think they have an opportunity to market some of those new lots. That's how I would read it.
okay, so my last thing, just, sorry. But where the sidewalk's going, that development's already done. So he's already been compensated for those lots.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilbur?
I'll add to the sidewalk. I'll be voting against this. I believe Ms. Rorson can put that sidewalk in. I also note that Mr. Rorson will need to pay for this processing application, but he also hasn't paid for the previous one that he had already come to council and asked us to make changes. So, one, I think Mr. Rorson needs to pay what's owed for the last development application. And I believe that sidewalk, as that area's been developed, it's a connectivity piece and it needs to be done as was first brought to council, which is this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments, further discussion? Councillor Parslow?
Well, I know that one of the big issues was the connectivity from 17th Street, and this will, in the briefing summary we have, this will be completed in 2021. So I think markets are tentative right now. Everything's a little slow down, but I'm pleased to support this because of that connectivity issue.
Thank you. I believe the sidewalk will be done in 2022. We give the extension for 1 year on that, and then 2 years on the fully permitting of the other associated lots. Kevin? Just want to make sure I'm correct on that.
Sorry, I was just speaking.
The completion of the sidewalk is to 2022, and then the fully getting the completion of the other lots was 2024, I think.
Yeah, through your worship, that
you're
is the
right.
request in front of us, is that they delay the sidewalk an additional year to 2022, and that all of the remaining lots would be titled by the end of 2024.
Thank you. Blair?
Sorry,
I'm just.
26. Sorry about that. The original was 2024.
Okay.
And moving all the lots to 2026. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
And we are, because there are two requests, or a number of requests within this, Mr. Rorson does state it's his intention to develop 23 lots over this year, and those would be registered this fall. So the first 23 of that development would be developed and registered as individual lots. The extension from 24 to 26 is the remainder. Just for clarity, because we're talking, there are 2 or 3 different issues here.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert, one more.
Thank you, Your Worship. Blair, I think maybe answered a little bit, but because there was multiple things in there, so I guess my opinion is I'm not okay with the sidewalk. I think those houses are developed, the sidewalk should be put in, but the other part about extending the developing of land, I would be okay with because of the pandemic and the situation. So I don't know, I guess I just need some direction on what I do after that.
It goes under the one development variance permit. We're approving it all, or do we, council, can have the ability to break that out, Kevin?
So through your worship, it's completely up to council. It's your discretion. So you have, your options are that you don't approve it as it is in front of you, and you stick with the existing variance that was approved a couple of years ago, or you can approve it, or you have the ability to alter it how you see fit. It is completely your discretion.
Councillor Javetkov?
So I support the motion. It's encouraging to me to see that Mr. Orson is interested in coming back and doing the development. This development project started years ago. Everybody knows how massive it is, and there's a lot of issues besides the COVID-19 with markets and that type of thing, and I see markets sort of improving now, and it would be nice to have that project complete, and I think getting those lots developed this year, 2021, and get them on the tax rolls, that's a huge development in my opinion. So I would like to see us approve the variance and look forward to completing this subdivision.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur, one more.
Well, I'm just concerned that it's the development that never ends, but where will it be? I don't see it anywhere in the report that there'll be some work done. This year was at 23 lots. I don't see that anywhere in here, so am I missing something? My concern is we're going to approve this or not, or make amendments, whatever, but I don't see that in there. I state again, though, I'm concerned that stuff that's already been applied for hasn't been paid for, and we're just going to extend this again. So on the sidewalk alone, I will not be supporting this, but where is it in what we're voting on, or that my colleagues will be voting on, however, that their 23 lots are going to be done now, this year?
Kevin?
So through your worship, the variance doesn't speak specifically to the 23 lots. The letter from Mr. Rorson that is attached states that it is his intention to develop 23 lots over the 2021 construction year and register in the fall. So we haven't made that a requirement of the variance, something that council could certainly make as an amendment if they so wish as a requirement.
Thank you. Further discussion? On the motion? You ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Councillor Kempf, Councillor Wilbur, Councillor Dober opposed. Thank you. 7.2, we have report number 21018 from the Recreation Manager regarding community services free programs, and this is the report that we received as requested by Councillor Kemp at the last meeting. So I need Councillor Parslow.
I move that report number 21-018 from the Recreation Manager Community Services free programs be received for information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried? Thank you. Thank you for that. Ross? Item 7.3, we have report number 21019 from the Recreation Manager regarding a Trans-Canada Trail Counter Agreement. Councillor Wilbur?
I would move that report number 21-019 from the Leisure Services and Wellness Coordinator regarding the Trans-Canada Trail Counter Agreement be received. Further, that Council approves the agreement for a period of 12 months with the start date to be agreed upon by both parties following the delivery of the equipment to the City of Dawson Creek. And further, that the Great Trail of Canada logo be used for advertising where applicable.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kemp, or Councillor Earl, go ahead.
Oh, I was initially pressed the button to move the motion, but I do somewhat hesitant to ask the question given the pep talk we got last meeting on staying focused. But just with respect to this technology, I would be more interested in getting a bit more information at some point about the cost of deploying it and what kind of functionality it might have for monitoring usage in our own parks. I know we have 37 wonderfully manicured parks that we've had numerous discussions about. That was the only thought I had to add, but I do support the motion.
Thank you, and you're perfectly in fine place to be speaking to the motion.
Okay.
Ross, you had a comment?
Thank you, through your worship. There is no cost to the city to install a single counter, which will be in Kin Park. It will do a couple of things. It will provide information to the Trans-Canada Trail Foundation, but it will further provide us information on the usage in that park. And we've had some discussions about that in recent months, and including of the paving and what have you. And so we're able to collect this information, and that will help to inform us in terms of future development and things of that nature. The Trans-Canada Trail will pay for any maintenance. They're providing the information or the equipment free of charge.
Thank you, Ross. Councillor Javetkov?
I'm just curious about vandalism. Kin Park is has a lot of traffic there. I just wondered what the susceptibility to vandalism is.
Thank you, through your worship. The counter itself will be installed on an existing sign or signage in the park. I am led to believe that it is somewhat vandalism proof, but my understanding is if there are any repairs that must be made or replacement of that equipment, it will be done through the foundation.
Thank you, Ross. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and just through you back to Ross. I understood from reading the report that this particular piece of equipment in this particular park would be covered by the Trans-Canada Trail folks. What I was inquiring about is with respect to the technology itself and how we as a city could deploy it for our own means in other parks. And it's not something I need an answer on, but that was kind of what I was floating out there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Further comments? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Item 7.4, we have report number 21013 from the Deputy Fire Chief regarding a mutual aid agreement for the South Peace Regional Area. Councillor Parslow?
I'd like to recommend that report number 21-013 from the Deputy Fire Chief for a mutual aid agreement for the South Peace Regional Area be received for discussion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Earl? Go ahead, Councillor Parslow.
Obviously, this is important, but I think I need a bit more information before I could support the whole recommendation. One's just a simple question. Why is the District of Chetwynd not part to this?
Blair?
In checking, I had the same question through your worship to Councillor Parslow. They felt that they were more closely hooked with Hudson's Hope and would enter into that agreement. It would be their determination to participate or not in this mutual aid agreement, and their choice, as I understand it, was to not be part of this one.
Okay, because I was thinking that Chetwynd is so much closer to Tumbler Ridge. So what led Tumbler Ridge to seek partnership with Dawson Creek and surrounding areas?
Through your worship, I can't answer that. That would be a determination made by each of the elected bodies, unless you have something further, Ross, on this. We have our Deputy Fire Chief here. Fred, maybe I will ask you if you heard the question to, it's with regard to Chetwynd and they're not participating. Yes, yeah.
Press anything?
Yeah, just press that button.
In regards to Chetwynd, originally the idea behind the agreement was I guess you'll call the north of the South Peace, and as I understand with Chetwynd, they already have something in play with, or have been working on something in play with Tumbler Ridge since the new fire chief, which is Dan Golub down there, after Chief Redpath left, Chief Redpath had been working with Tumbler Ridge on something between Chetwynd and Tumbler Ridge. So we weren't fully apprised of that. So we would have to delve into that, or that would be up to them. We were just trying to get sort of our own ducks in a row before we expanded too far, and maybe excuse me, couldn't work. But I know from past experience that we do meet up with them periodically on the highway. So it's a very good question, sir.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Can I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
The second question is I'm always concerned about costs. So I'd like to, let's say a unit goes from Dawson Creek, and who covers their wages in this? Is it fully, I know there's reference to the receiver of the aid,
Yeah.
let's say it could be Tumbler Ridge, paying all costs, but let's say the unit that is on call for that day is now going to Tumbler Ridge and a backup crew is brought in. Who pays for the backup crew?
Go ahead.
Oh, it looks like you were going to say something. The process around mutual aid is, at the end of the day, we will have costs, they will have costs. So it would be no different than if Tumbler Ridge came because we had a big wildfire or something happening here, and they had to pay the costs of their members because they're away from work. They had to pay their wages. Then that community is responsible for the wages, right? Excuse me. But typically on a mutual aid agreement, because they're not used heavily, this isn't like an automatic aid agreement where you're running out the door every time somebody has a fire. It's only when something really catastrophic happens. Typically, they weigh them off at the end of the year and see who sort of has the most. But honestly, it'd be very hard to say what the cost would be, but, I mean, we would acquire costs if we went to help somebody else. But on the flip side, we have no problem asking for help. So it's a two-way street, right? So we would be responsible for our own costs, other than consumables.
Thank you. Blair?
Just following through on what Deputy Fire Chief Fred was saying, this is our cost other than consumables. So as was laid out, if we had a call for aid and had to go to Tumbler Ridge and we sent a crew of 4, for example, we would be paying their wages, and we would call in the next crew and we would pay their wages as well. So as was said, we would cover that cost, and if we needed reciprocated help, the responding area would cover their costs but send their help here. So.
And in the event that you had a call out such as that where you'd been asked to go and help out Pooskoopie as an example, or Tumbler Ridge, or an area, and we had an event that required backup and support, then we call in that corresponding units in the area to be able to help provide that support to our community if one of them were out as well. So yeah, the mutual aid agreement, certainly we've got a committee that we work together on from Area D, Pooskoopie and Dawson. And Charlie Lake, Fort St. John have mutual aid agreements. It's common for communities to ensure that we have that support from your neighbors in the event that you had that need. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you. I am prepared to move the motion.
Yeah, we just said, go ahead.
But I do have a question first.
Yep.
Okay. I noticed that if any party wanted to sign off of the agreement, they could. So I'm wondering, is there then the opportunity for the other communities to sign on to the agreement after it's already been?
Well, excuse me. I think the idea about the first part of your phrase was that the mutual aid agreement wouldn't collapse because somebody decided to pull out.
Exactly.
But the addition of somebody else, we would have to go back and review that and make sure all parties understand, and then that all parties that are part of it already would accept that, right? So there would be a little bit of work behind that.
But the opportunity's there.
Yeah. And if you look at, like, if you take the mutual aid agreement and look at, like, sort of through it, not about the part about responding, but about the fact that we now legally have a document that allows us to assist, because this has been heavily reviewed in legal, that we aren't hanging ourselves out to dry here. Before, if we went to help somebody, we had no document or no legal opinion on if we were or weren't allowed to proceed. So this has all been vetted through legal, so it stands on its own feet right now.
Thank you. Councillor Wilbur?
So I can make my motion?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move that report number 21-013 from the Deputy Fire Chief regarding the mutual aid agreement for the South Peace Regional Area be received. Further, that council approves and enters into the mutual aid agreement for the South Peace Regional Area for a term of 5 years, beginning the date the agreement is fully executed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kemp, discussion on the motion? Council? Ready for the question?
Oh, can I have one comment?
Go ahead.
Similar but a little off topic. So I'm fire chief's daughter, but what I want to say is about these agreements is that my father had a piece in doing something like this, and because it happened, there's now fire protection from Prince George all the way to Quesnel. So I think there's a huge benefit in this when people aren't relying on buckets and garden hoses, and they know that their fire departments, whether volunteer or not, have come together to provide protective services. So I'm proud to support this motion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Report 75, item number 75, report number 21023 from the airport manager regarding request for proposals for the Dawson Creek Airport restaurant operations. Councillor Javetkov?
I'll move the report 2021-023 from the airport manager, request for proposals 2021-01 Dawson Creek be received. Further, that RFP 2021-01 Dawson Creek Airport operations be awarded to Don Bambuwala for a 3-year term commencing February 2021 and expiring in February 2024 at a rate of $550 per month and profit sharing of 5% for 2021 and 10% for 2022.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilbur, discussion? Councillor Dober?
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay. I just had one question about I read through all of it, but you know, the other proposals seemed to bring a bit more income, but I think it made sense that they chose what they felt was right for the airport. Just the profit sharing part, the 5 and 10%, is there more details on that? Because that can be, you know, pretty skewed on an onerous base if it's needed to be.
Blair?
Through you, Your Worship, our airport manager would finalize that in the terms. I can bring that back to you if to make sure that everybody is aware of, you know, I anticipate that it is, you know, the 5 and 10% is based on profit, but we can bring the finalization of that agreement back so that you know exactly what that would be written up as.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I need to see. I thought maybe just bringing it aware to everybody,
Okay,
your
I'll bring-
attention, so that they can look at that. Because
We can do that.
just know being through partnership agreements and profit sharing, there's a million ways that can be written.
All right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The airport is obviously one of our strategic priorities and obviously important to us. So I guess that term for me is just the only aspect that I think about in terms of do we have normal termination language in it if we wanted to? Blair? Sorry.
Through you, Your Worship, we will ensure that there will be exit clauses from both parties. It is standard practice to be able to do that. There would have to be certainly notification given. There's an investment by the individual, whoever it would be, that takes this on, and a purchase of equipment and so on. Some of the stuff, there's an incurred cost. So we'll make sure there's an exit clause for either party.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Item 7.6, we have today a verbal report from our General Manager of Community Services. And this really flows as a result of our public health order that was delivered late Friday night, and we knew we couldn't get it on in time. So perhaps if we can have a motion to receive the report verbally from our General Manager of Community Services. Councillor Wilbur, Councillor Kemp, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Ross?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As you are probably aware, Friday morning, the provincial health officer extended the existing order. I'm not sure that that was a surprise to anybody, although the one point that was that there's no date on the order. It's to be extended until further notice. That order states that there are no spectators in the building, there are no travel for sport, adults can still no longer play. No games, no tournaments, and really handcuffs us in terms of what we can accomplish. At the last regular meeting, you did receive some information with respect to the significant reduction in operations at the Kin Arena as a result of those Phase 2 guidelines, and council further directed that we would close that building subject to the provincial health order, which came on Friday.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Ross. Discussion, council? So we did, and Blair did receive a letter from minor hockey on Friday night, I guess, or over the weekend, and their request is that the city would consider keeping the Kin Arena operational until the end of February, when the health regulations are going to be reviewed. By keeping it open, they feel it will ensure consistency in programmed exercise for the kids in minor hockey. And if Dawson Creek is required to use the Memorial Arena exclusively for practice, it will result in a large loss of ice for their teams with little other activities. And then the concern about if there are games allowed to be played after the end of February, they'll have less availability to offer their teams. So the concern obviously this year for them is if they've seen many restrictions and not have been able to offer our membership very much value for the fees that they've played. And the worry is that we will lose more members if we won't recover them next season, and could have an impact on minor hockey for many seasons. So I just wanted to make sure that council, and I think council will have a copy of that letter. So discussion, Councillor Wilbur?
Through you to staff, how much have they actually used the Kin Arena since it's been open?
Thank you, through your worship. Information presented at the last meeting would suggest that it was about 7.5 hours more per week than what was initially used back in September with just a single arena, the Memorial Open.
So, if I may.
Go ahead.
I just want to throw it out there again that, and I'm a big hockey fan, I am, but we have many user groups that have had no seasons for a year. They're not getting one this year. They're already canceling their seasons. I don't think there's any benefit to the community or to us. I do not have faith that things are going to be lifted at the end of the month, the way things are going. And I think it's time that our community is going to have to accept that on some levels, it's just, no, we can't do it. And so when do we draw the line? And so for me, and everyone knows I voted against opening it in the first place, but I'm standing by that. I think it's time that we're going to have to learn to adjust and move forward. And I do not see, this is an expense to the taxpayers. We're not even going to break even. And so when I look at other organizations that aren't going to utilize any space coming up they've had nothing over the winter, they're not going to have anything come spring or summer. Hockey's great, but I think they're going to have to accept the world's changed, and until this ends, we are just going to have to slow it down. And so from me, I'm sorry, but the answer is no extension on, that's how I'm voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dover?
Thank you, Worship. I get just two parts. One, just to a little bit what Councillor Shaley said. My understanding is like the Kin Arena, the Memorial Arena, the swimming pool, they never break even, correct? Like they're not. Okay. The other part of that is, I know the 7.5 hours doesn't make sense, but during school hours, there's obviously probably not much use at the arena. So after school hours and weekends, are both arenas like close to capacity? Like are they all ice times filled, or is there, days that go by where one of the arenas not even being used?
Thank you, through your worship. I don't believe they are, and in fact, conversations with our recreation manager would suggest that the groups were not taking full advantage of the Kin Arena, and as an example, early morning times that typically would be used, that those weren't all being booked up until this point.
They're just kind of using the luxury of having more time, so they're just filling the better spots.
Thank you. Councillor Javekov?
Yeah, so I think the organization is hoping against hope. I mean, we just had the announcement, and I think the wording was the rules were extended indefinitely, and I just don't see anything happening in 3 weeks. It just, with what's going on with COVID, to expect some kind of a major change in 3 weeks is just unrealistic.
Thank you. Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do find myself agreeing with Councillor Javetkov on that. We gave it the old college try in opening the Kin Arena, and while it was available, the user groups made use of it, but I think keeping the facility open for a month at 7 hours use, I mean, and just off the top, it's what, $1,500 a day to run with ice in, or 2,000. It's, yeah. I mean, any way you do the math, 7 hours of usage per week, I can't justify that, and I can't do it based on the hope, and it does seem like somewhat of a distant hope at this moment that by the end of the month things will turn around and allow a return to gameplay and whatnot. So I'm gonna have to, I guess there's no motion before council. We're just kind of reaffirming or speaking to the motion we already passed at the last meeting, right?
Thank you. So I just want to, just before, two or 3 points. We have a policy for our youth groups that we only charge them half of whatever the rate is for us to operate the facility. So if the Memorial Arena is $200 an hour, we charge the youth groups $100, or $200 an hour for the or $100, we charge them $50. And so the part of the structure for currently at the Kin Arena, because we don't have that operational flow that we do in the Memorial Arena for flow of, we have to close it, we rent it for an hour and then we have to close it for an hour in order to do that deep clean. So when you have that 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon for ice time availability for the kids in speed skating, figure skating, hockey, whatever, till basically 9 o'clock, you got 5 hours. But when you go to deep cleaner for 2 of those, you're down to 2 hours to 3 hours per day of availability of ice. And so over 5 days or 6 days, you're only adding about 10 to 12 hours in that core time for the kids. And so I guess the question I would have to staff is, what's our current, and Councillor Earl used the figure of $1,500 to $2,000 a day for our cost to operate the facility?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will defer to our recreation manager.
Your Worship, I don't have exact cost, but what our cost was when we did the fees and charges was $379 an hour. That's what the cost was in 2016 when we did our fees and charges. But when we do the come up with the cost is, I don't have that right here.
Okay.
But we can get it for you, so I apologize.
Thank you. So, Blair?
Just for clarity as well, the 7.5 hours that was mentioned, the additional hours that are being utilized right now by minor hockey, figure skating, speed skating, as a result, when Mayor and Council made the decision to open the Kin Arena, there was gameplay permitted at that time. So the 7.5 hours is reflective of no gameplay. I think that number would be higher if there was gameplay allowed. It's just part of the entire COVID issue that we face, if that brings a little bit of clarity. I didn't want people to think that the city opened the Kin Arena and that there was no uptake per se to use it. There was uptake, but then it faded very quickly when the new health order was issued that there would be no gameplay. So.
And speed skating also, their outdoor oval, and so I'm assuming that they moved outside and took less of the inside ice, which is normal, typical, and frees up more ice at the Memorial Arena because they usually just use the Memorial Arena because of the pads and all that. Councillor Wilbur, once more.
Thank you. And I also want to add that there's been no adult play for much longer. So it's not that I think the team, they wouldn't use it more. They would, I guess, if they could have gameplay. I'm really just frameworking this around COVID-19 itself, and it's just not feasible. The reality is, at some point, we're all going to have to accept that not now is the answer. So I stand as I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will comment, I honestly, on your point about there are tons of groups that haven't used or had access to recreation. Man, I think we've done an amazing job of trying to ensure we got the pool open and the arenas open and the school or the parks programs and all of those things. So I know that there are some groups that aren't, but certainly those that we have been able to accommodate this winter, I think we've done a good job of it. The dilemma for us is operating this facility and how we recover those normal fees that impact the overall operating costs that help reduce the cost to the taxpayers. So we should have a motion then to direct our administration as to the impacts of this, and are we going to maintain the operations as they are, or are we going to direct that we close the Kin Arena for use? Brenda, go ahead.
Through your worship, the current direction of council is to close the arena effective today.
Okay, thank you.
What is in order is to receive the letter and respond to their request.
Thank you. So we should notify Dawson Creek Minor Hockey Association of council's decision that we are directing the closure of the Kin Arena today, and advise them of that. Blair, you wanted to speak to that?
Just a quick one. I know Ross was going to mention this. If council does not change the motion that's presently adopted by council, we have spoken with minor hockey. They would be given notice. It would be down at the end of this week on the Friday,
Okay.
I believe, just to give that transitional time for the user groups at this point.
Thank you. Okay. So a motion to direct a response to Dawson Creek Minor Hockey that we've received their letter and that council is confirming the decision to close the Kin Arena at the end of, on February the 13th or whatever the date is for Friday. Councillor Parslow, go ahead.
Yes, I so move using the words that you just spoke.
Thank you. Second? Councillor Wilbur, discussion on the motion? So decision will be that, direction will be to administration that the Kin Arena will be closed on Friday at the end of the day. Plant will be turned off, and that we will advise minor hockey and the other user groups as well about the implications of that. I'm assuming administration will now work with all of the groups to ensure that a communication for all of the speed skaters, figure skaters, minor hockey, and the groups understanding that there will be now a need to look at the allocation of ice appropriately for now that we just have the one arena. Ross?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And through your own direction, we have been working with all groups at the arena in anticipation of that notice, and we'll continue to do that through the next several weeks.
Thank you so much. Further discussion on the motion, Council? Anyone? You ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Item 8, bylaws. 8.1, we have our bylaw amendment bylaw for consideration of adoption. Councillor Javetkov, go ahead.
I'll move adoption.
Thank you. Second? Councillor Earl, discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Mayor's business, item 9. We attend a regular update from Northern Health on a bi-weekly basis in regards to the COVID-19, and also this last one we also spoke on the opioid response and the seriousness of that. Tends to get overlooked in terms of how significant and serious the whole issue of the opioid impact is to certainly the province, but northern BC, and it almost is heartbreaking when you see the impacts to our community and young people being so, and families and friends being so negatively impacted by this really horrible tragedy that goes on in our communities. And so we had a really good discussion about that, and then also Northern Health gave the update on a regular basis about the response to COVID and the pandemic and the impacts of moving forward with it. I had an update with Coastal GasLink from TC Energy, and they gave an update. Obviously, they were significantly impacted by the closure, the public health order at Christmas time in regards to restricting their operations, as were all major industrial operations in northern British Columbia as it related to industrial camps and the capacity that they were going to allow in camps. And everybody was locked back down to about 400 people. And so that is starting to transition itself now, and they're starting to see, they put their plan forward, TC Energy have, to the BC's Chief Medical Health Officer in regards to the beginning to increase the workers across the project in northern British Columbia and how that's impacting their ability to move forward with the project, as well as LNG Canada, et cetera. So it's just an update that they provided to us last week, and it was good to get that information. There was a town hall meeting I attended on Play On Canada, and this is that National Street Hockey Championship that goes on across Canada, and I know Ross has been working with it, and council had given the approval about a year ago for us to explore the potential of Play On. It was normally funded by CBC, and I think hockey through that arm, and they put on a major national championship, and we have been engaging with them on the potential to perhaps host a play-on component in Dawson Creek as part of this championship, and I attended a town hall meeting in regards to it, I think a week and a half ago, and it was just updating on the works, and they're working with the federal government for funding for it, and it's not one that they look to us to put a bunch of money in to help host, but more about the function of hosting the event and how significant it can be in Canada. We got the BC Housing, and so as a result of the frustration we saw with that project of not seeing a bunch of local support to local workers, and so Chamber, Chris and Kathleen and I and Blair had a meeting with BC Housing and the contractors and Horizon North in regards to it, and so we really have moved in that. Now we have a bi-weekly meeting with them in regards to the project and how it's moving forward and the potential for next segments of contracts that they're going to be doing and working on. The project is nearing completion. I think the end of February that occupancy will begin, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that will happen in the springtime with regards to landscaping and paving and sidewalk and all that type of stuff, and they've committed to us that they will be absolutely moving forward with local suppliers, and we'll ensure that we help them identify who those are to ensure that we get the broadest possible support to the project from our local business folks. That's it for me. Any questions, anybody? Councillor Earl?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick follow-up with respect to the Northern Health and particularly the COVID-19 update. Just wondering if Northern Health or the province has communicated any requirements or any kind of what they're going to require from us as they roll out their vaccine program. Just doing some back-of-the-napkin math based on a 2-dose vaccine, they need to vaccinate about 120 people or administer about 120 vaccines a day in our community to meet the September timeline. I'm just wondering, number one, knowing how we are resourced for healthcare staff to make sure that we have the healthcare resources to meet that, and if not, or if there's anything required from us as a city to help facilitate it, if they've communicated that.
Yeah, they really, they modeled the BC Centre for Disease Control at the protocols that they're going to administer the vaccines to those segments of the population. And so the first were those in ALC, or the long-term care, the workers in there. The next will be those workers that are working in ICU, Emerge, along with essential visitors to those programs. I think any resident over 80, and then First Nations, Métis over 65 will be that second cohort, along with paramedics, I think, fit within that second cohort. And then the third, they drop that down. So I think and that's on the BC Centre for Disease Control's website, along with Northern Health, in terms of those populations. And honestly, I think the issue right now has been, as we've seen nationally, is the availability of vaccine in terms of being able to adhere to those planned protocols that they've got set for it. We have had no input from them whatsoever that they're not going to be able to do that, and I know that the city of Dawson Creek, the residents here at the Rotary Manor, and those folks in there had got their first vaccinations a week ago, and as well as I think the nurses at the hospital were those were dealing with the patients in ICU were the first cohort. So,
okay, thank you.
Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, this relates to the Coastal Gas Link. I'm not sure if all councillors are aware that NDIT announced a new grant application which the city of Dawson Creek is eligible for. I passed it on to my colleague, Councillor Wilbur. She has all the details, and you're going to be making an application for a very, a project that's in place. But I think it didn't say there couldn't be multiple applications, right? So it's to support those communities, and First Nations communities are included, related to additional health services linked to the development of this LNG infrastructure. And the grant will pay 90% of the costs. So I don't know if staff's seen that. Has staff seen that new application?
Blair?
Through your worship, I haven't seen the new application, but through discussions with yourself, certainly aware of this. And we have a grant writer in-house that works. The focus primarily, obviously, is on city applications, but we do have the ability to work with independent groups that apply for these to give guidance and so on.
Right. So I was thinking, I imagine, transient workers, fluctuations in population. I don't know how it could be used, but we need to get creative. We should do. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's it for me. We'll move to our CAO and got some operational updates. Blair?
Your worship, I have nothing to add at this point on operational updates under this report. I know that following, I do have a couple of overviews that were asked by council. I'll deliver those, but overall, what I would say is thank you to yourselves, the staff at the city, all of our employees. Working through these COVID times, it is a little different, I think is a fair way to put it. I think everybody is doing a great job at all of our facilities, at City Hall, our outside workers. So really just take this opportunity to say thank you to everyone that is employed at the city for the work you're doing on behalf of our community and the residents and businesses here.
Thank you. And we're going to do those two reports later on. The report on the agreement and the for the event center as well as the Peace River agreement.
You so choose, your
Let's
worship.
get through the agenda and do them at the end if we can. Okay. And diary. Sorry, Blair.
Nothing new to report on the diary, your worship.
Thank you. If I can have a motion for the consent calendar, Councillor Dober, second, Councillor Kemp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Is there anybody on there that would like to speak to or lift from the consent? That's the letter from the Mayor of Vancouver, North Vancouver. Thank you. Strategic priorities, anything to update?
No updates, your worship. We're concluding and finalizing the 2021 strategic priorities that Mayor and Council have been working on, and we will be releasing those very quickly.
Okay. So with that, we are at 10:15, and so we have a closed, and I'm thinking about so let's take a 7-minute recess or now, and then we'll come back and complete the open and then do closed. Are we ready? Everybody back? So we'll call ourselves back to order, and this time we have our CEO is going to give us a overview update on two agreements. The first is our overview of the Peace River Agreement, and this was as a result of council asking for an update overview.
All right. Thank you, your worship. And through you to all of council, this was a request that was put forward based on the Fair Share Agreement, or the Peace River Agreement as it's known today. What I thought is I would give a high-level overview and then really open it up for any questions that you may have of this agreement and move it forward that way. So the Fair Share Agreement, the first agreement was signed in 1994. The work began in about 1992. As a result of the lack of access to industrial taxation within the region, the Peace River Regional District, or the entire Northeast, I'll say, because Fort Nelson originally was part of that discussion. There was a great deal of work put together. The region came together, talked about the infrastructure backlog, the lack of access to classes 2, 4, and 5, which are really your industrial tax bases. Unlike most of the province, I've said this before, most of that assessment falls within inside municipal boundaries, and the communities are then able to set their tax rates and realize that taxation benefit. In the Peace River Regional District, it is not so that way. Most of our industrial assessment, or much of it, falls outside our municipal boundaries simply because of the nature of the oil and gas industry and how it operates. There was a discussion at one point, would the communities reach out and satellite incorporate 1,000 wellheads, for example? The province didn't like that idea, so they worked with the region to come up with a number of options, and the one that was landed on was fair share through a great deal of negotiations. So 1994, it was started, as I said, the first agreement was signed, $2 million was given to the region to be distributed by the regional district on a formula agreed to within the region and by the government of the day. It was renewed in 1997, at which point $12 million, there was $10 million added to the $2 million, again to be distributed through the formula that has been agreed to. Again, it was renewed in 2005, at which time it went to, there was a $20 million agreement. That's what would come annually to the region to be distributed utilizing the formula. But there was a $40 million one-time grant given to be distributed, and I believe it was the formula that was utilized to determine who received what. And I will go by memory. I think Dawson Creek at the time received around $10 million of that, I think. It might be right in that range. Fort Nelson was exempted from this. They went after a different route, became a regional municipality, which was broader than a local municipality that most of us in the Peace River region enjoy. It gave them greater access to a tax base that was broader as a result of that regional municipal boundaries. This is a memorandum of understanding, so it is dealt with. It is not a piece of legislation, as many people have had discussions about over the years in my involvement. It's a memorandum of understanding that is put before the provincial cabinet, who agrees or disagrees, and they have agreed and worked on this. In 2015, it was then Premier Christy Clark who raised the issue to say we would like to look at this agreement again. It wasn't due to open until 2020, but they had, I believe, a great deal of pressure saying we want to look at this. Things had slowed down in the oil patch a little bit at that point. They had a great deal of requests from other areas in the province wanting a fair share agreement, is how I would, envision my interpretation of it. Which is very important to point out. Much of the province looks at the Peace River region and this fair share Peace River agreement and thinks it's a resource revenue sharing agreement. It is not. We do not share in the resource revenue generated from the natural gas activity, and I'll speak primarily to that. This is access to Class 2, 4, and 5, which, as I said earlier, most municipalities have access to their industrial tax base. So, probably the most fundamental thing that we can share with our neighbors outside of the Peace River Regional District is to have them gain an understanding that this is not resource revenue sharing. So in 2015, it was opened. There was concern. It wasn't due to be opened until 2020, but I've said this many times. It goes to the vulnerability of an agreement. At that time, it was agreed. The region said, we will come to the table. We want to say in this renegotiation. At which point, I think a very good agreement, in my mind, was reached. It was moved to $50 million per year with an escalator clause in there of 2% per year. Again, there were new reporting strategies put in. When that agreement was reached, there was a one-time payment of $3 million also given to the region to be distributed for use how the area would like to use it, and they used the same funding formula to distribute that $3 million. The key dates in the agreement that you've seen, and I'll go over them, 2023 and 2031 are the years that we will review the annual rate of growth, which is the 2%. So nothing is due up in 2023 as far as how much we get, but what is due up is that 2% annual rate of growth appropriate? Is it low? Is it high? There's a discussion between our region and the government on that. In 2031, that same discussion is brought forward. Is the annual rate of growth acceptable to either party? If it is, then it continues. If it isn't, maybe it needs to be more, maybe it needs to be less, but that would be a discussion point. Also in 2031, the annual payment amount is up for discussion. So is the $50 million presently, which is with a 2% index going each year, is it satisfactory? Is it enough? Is it too much? That discussion will be had. If there's an agreement reached on changing the number of $50 million, that would not be instituted until 2035. And then following every 8 years, that would be reviewed. So the agreement goes on in perpetuity as you look at it and read it. But again, I caution council from thinking it is cast in stone. It is a memorandum of understanding. The governments, and I will use both governments, the New Democrats who worked on it originally, the BC Liberals who enhanced it, and then the New Democrats who administer it today, all have been supportive of this. So this is one of those items that I think transcends political boundaries, with a recognition of the impact that we've seen in this region, and government recognizing that and sharing some of the access they have to the taxation base outside municipal boundaries. Everybody is in this, as I said, except Fort Nelson. The rural areas receive a portion as well, based on the formula that is put forward. Dawson Creek and Fort St. John are the major beneficiaries based because the formula, as you will have seen in the memorandum of understanding I attached to this council meeting, it's a complex formula, but one that was agreed to and one that works well. But again, the premise of fair share is one that is to bring some equity to our local area, and I think it's done that in a very positive way. This year, we will see $15.67 million brought into the operational budget of the city of Dawson Creek. The real push that Mayor and Council have agreed to, particularly over the last 2.5 years, is that there's a shift to move the money we receive from the fair share revenue or Peace River Agreement revenue, with 70% being the goal to move to capital and 30% remaining in operations. Of that 30%, within the city of Dawson Creek, the choice is that would cover debt payment as well, which is incurred for capital projects. So it would be far greater than the actual 70%. Probably I will use in the 85% range when you bring in the capital debt. So again, making good progress down that road, and we will continue to do it. But with that, Your Worship, I will maybe leave it at that and try and answer questions if there are things. And if you wanted me to go into further depth, I am certainly willing to do that. I have been involved in these discussions since 1993 for the region. And as recently as 2015, when I was not involved with Mayor and Council, I worked on behalf of the region to renegotiate the 2015 agreement.
Thank you, Blair. Councillor Parslow.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. I believe the initial $10 million was applied to the ice plant at the multiplex. Yep. Yes, I have just 3 or 4 questions. So you've covered off one of them, MOU. What is an MOU and all that stuff? But there's a couple of things I I don't understand or would like some explanation how it might work. So section 20, subsection A, it reads, the parties, if the province, I'll read the preamble, if the province implements a policy change, legislative amendment to an enactment or a change to any order under the Assessment Act, and the province or the region believes that the policy change impacts the region in a materially different manner than other industrial municipalities, then section A, the parties will enter into negotiations with the intent to ensure that the region is maintained within the average per capita industrial revenues of the top 10 industrial municipalities in the rest of British Columbia. So, I'd like you to unpack that for me, because I understand the preamble, but what would the impact be? I mean, to retain us in the top 10? Because aren't some of our beneficiaries, some of our municipalities are in the top 10 already? Are they not? Like Hudson's Hope, Tumbler Ridge, and with their industrial tax base, Taylor? Are they included in it? And how would this work, and what might the impact be?
Thank you. And through your worship, what would happen is if, through an enactment, as was talked about, if the province implements a policy change, legislative amendment, it would be based possibly, and I can only use hypothetical because Class 2, 4, and 5 is the classes we access in order to gain the revenue we do through PRA, or the government accesses and shares that. If they made a change saying that we were going to change the rates that they collect, either 2, 4, and 5 in the rural districts, if they made a policy change, say we're going to do something to be of assistance, if they went down that road to try and enhance the development, and again, I'll speak to the natural gas industry, and it impacted the revenue they collect, we would need to enter into negotiations at that point. The goal ensuring is that we're in the top 10, as you pointed out. Yes, we have a couple of areas that have very significant boundaries, Hudson's Hope being one, Tumbler Ridge being another. Some have greater access to the industrial tax base, particularly when you talk about Hudson's Hope, Tumbler Ridge, or Taylor, for example. But they don't receive the same revenue as some of the others because of that. The formula includes a population, the ability of your municipality or district to access the Class 2, 4, and 5, what that means. So we would enter into those. We would ensure that we never fell below based on what they had planned if they were looking at a directional change within government. It would take a fairly significant alteration within how they collect taxes in the rural areas, I think, to have a significant impact on what we see today with that $50 million. But.
Okay. Can I just have a couple of... So, Section 21, Allocation Formula Review. Now, I know the formula's pretty complicated, but do you know how much the regional directors get for their area, approximately, from the present formula?
I believe the 4 area directors receive $750,000, I believe, and I stand to be corrected, but I didn't bring that information today. I believe it's $750,000 each for each rural director. It may even have increased some on that, Your Worship. I'm not sure if you've seen anything different. Okay.
Okay, my last question, if I may.
Yep.
My last question, again, is maybe how I'm reading it. Section 23. Now, this is all to do with the formula, and I read here, any proposed allocation formula should weight the allocations towards the region's local governments that do not have adequate industrial tax base support, as evidenced by comparison to a representative group of industrial municipalities elsewhere in the province, have historically not benefited from industrial tax base support resulting in infrastructure deficits, are experience high levels of population growth and demands for service due to the growth of industry, and play a vital service center in supporting both industry and a large contiguous rural population. So the formula talks about weighting allocations. So we have a mixed bag of municipalities here in our benefiting area, as you've just, Tumbler Ridge, Hudson Hope, Taylor, Chetwynd is the district of Chetwynd as well. So are we getting a fair weighting? And if I look at, I always remember what a former finance officer of the city told me about the comparative, what 1 mil would generate in tax revenue to Fort St. John and 1 mil here in Dawson Creek. And I'm just wondering, has the staff had any time to put some fresh eyes on that formula? Are we getting our fair share? Because certainly, we're a vital service center. We support an industry in a large contiguous rural population. I mean, we certainly qualify for all these things, but I'm just looking at that comparison. When we look at the review, are we getting? Is Fort St. John and Dawson being compared equally, regardless of population, which is another factor? Or are we, do we have a case perhaps for a larger allocation of the formula?
And thank you for the question. And through your worship, the allocation formula has been a topic of discussion since 1993. It has been adjusted with, there is a pool A and a pool B, you will see, and that goes back to the original formula and the amount used, and then the secondary amount being brought in. The formula is set in a way that I believe, and I believe the region has worked hard on this, is equitable. It is based on population, so that it goes up and down. We could lose, for example, I believe the city a number of years ago had an adjustment downwards of $1 million on short notice because of the numbers that they put into this formula. But no, I don't believe there's any inequity in that formula as I see it. It was re-looked at again in 2015, and there is a base that says, whether it's Fort St. John, whether it's Dawson Creek, whether it's Pooskoopie or any of them, the formula is applied equally. And again, it's based on a number of factors. I'll talk to the primary ones. You've got population issues. You have your industrial tax base that falls within your municipal boundaries. We also have an agreement with the District of Chetwynd that shares in tax revenue from the old Tembec plant that's, I'll say, just the other side of the Pine River. So, no, it works well. Having the history I've had, I don't think you could look for a fairer, more equitable distribution. And the one thing that it speaks volumes of is that formula was agreed to by the region in order to achieve each and every one of these fair share agreements. So I don't think we could make a case to say we're shorted on it. I think it is equitable.
Thank you. Further discussion? Thanks, Blair. So with that, we move to the item 10.2, and that's the overview of the Encana Event Center Management Agreement.
If I could just close off, Your Worship, on that one. I think we're very fortunate to have the Fair Share Agreement as a region. I think it has been one of the most collaborative efforts I've seen in my many years of involvement, going back to 1993, that the region has come together on. And I think it speaks to what can be done when we as a region come together versus individually approaching Victoria. So a very good one. Also, I believe each of you will have received this package upon your election or shortly after. It is a Fair Share Peace River Memorandum of Understanding, a history. It is a great document, one that goes through much of what I've just said, a little more detail. So if you have any questions as you go through that, let me know as well. So. Okay, I see some councillors shaking their head. I believe it was in your bins a year and a half ago. So I will, if you don't have it, I'll get you another copy. All right. Okay. Now, Your Worship, moving on, the next one I was asked to give an overview of was the Global Spectrum Agreement, which is our Encana Event Center. There are a number of agreements that are attached to that. I will speak primarily to the main management agreement, but will answer any questions you have. We have the management agreement, we have a food services agreement, we have a ticket agreement. We also have an MOU based on what was agreed to for your base case as is referred to in this document. But let's go into it, and I will again go through it and then answer questions as Mayor and Council may have. It was entered into in 2017. It is a 10-year agreement. It is to be either renewed or not in 2027. It runs for 10 years. You will note that the agreement talks to one number. We have adjusted that number, or Mayor and Council and the city did, as a result of some changes. I believe, I'll give you an example, the health services tax was not contemplated when the agreement was entered into, and then the government made changes. The amount the city pays, a fee for service to Global Spectrum today, is $1.65 million. You may see $1.8 million in the budget, as was just presented last Thursday evening. That is an insurance that we pay on top of this. It is a city building, and the city pays to insure that as well. So as I said, we had the fixed management fee within this agreement, which it is tied to CPI as well. We have incentive fees that are in this contract. So if they meet local hire, for example, when they procure, what's their local procurement? There are a number of things that come into that allows them to work towards these incentive fees, both qualitative and quantitative. I was asked some time ago to look at, what do we see? We have a termination clause that's in there. Both parties can exit the agreement. It is not an easy exit clause, and understandably so. I think there's probably a great deal of investment put in by the Global Spectrum who comes to the table, but there is that. Under section, I believe it's 15.2, each year the annual operating budget is brought to the city for our review and acceptance. It goes through our finance department. I know that there is another one that was asked about. There's a force majeure clause contained, and for force majeure clauses, they are the unknown, to protect you from the unknown. We have that. Could it be said that COVID is an unknown? Possibly. There is another clause in 29.5 that speaks to the force majeure, that even if there is a force majeure issue, the funding still has to be continued. So as we go through the Global Spectrum, I'm now going to go into the document a bit and just try and touch on a couple of areas that may be of interest for you. I touched on the term and termination. I have spoke about the $1.65 million. There are, as you go through it, and again, I'm giving you my best legal interpretation of this and not being a lawyer. This was negotiated and agreed to before my time, but I think it is, in the discussions I've had since my engagement as your CAO for the city, I have met and spoke with legal counsel on a number of questions we had and gone through it. So the sides that we have in here, as I stated earlier, an important part is section 15.2, the approval of the annual operating budget, which comes to us. We look at that each and every year. There's always questions. They run about $3 million a year budget to operate the facility, of which we contribute at 1.65, as I said, for our fee for service. Under the terms, there is a sharing arrangement on the cost of utilities, for example. Encana pays 10% of the water and sewer. The pool and Lakota pick up the rest. It makes sense that the pool is weighted heavily on the water side at 75%. The Pacific Northern gas bill is shared. 50% is paid by the Encana Center. 30% is paid by the pool and 20% by Lakota. And BC Hydro, again, the Encana Center pays 50% of that cost. 30% is paid by the pool for hydro and 20% by the Lakota Center. And that was an agreement that was reached when this was negotiated originally. It's a very complex document. I'm not sure if you want me to go into the food services side of it. Really, it goes hand in hand with this. They provide the food services at the Encana Center. They also will provide ticketing. They've entered into agreements on ticketing, how the tickets are sold. They can also go out, sell tickets for other venues, I believe. So overall, quite a complex agreement, but one that is with us until 2027. Your Worship, I'm not sure if you want me to walk through paragraph by paragraph. I could do that, but I think we might be here well into the afternoon. I maybe will leave it at that. It is a high-level overview of this agreement. Key issues, as I said, $1.65 million we pay for a fee for service. We have an agreement that lasts until 2027. They run the operations of the Encana Center, but they're also responsible for the maintenance of the entire building through the HVAC, which they look after for the pool, the Lakota Center, and the facility itself. We're fortunate to have the staff they have on the operations side out there in maintenance. They do a good job. But with that, maybe I will leave it.
Open it up for questions, and I just want to clarify, so when those utilities, as an example, that's paid by Spectrum through that 1.6 that we give them as part of that overall yearly subsidy?
Yes, they do that. There's also the ability on the incentive fees, Your Worship, that I didn't touch on. If they do better than budget, there's the ability for us to save dollars as well. I'll give you an example. Through the COVID year, obviously, they have been down for a significant part of 2020. Roughly 9 months, 8 months of that, of the past year, they were down because of the COVID issue. There's a realized savings, and I will use very round numbers, in the about $212,000 range possibly. Then the incentives, there are still incentives that they meet as per the signed contract that the city has with them. We'll bring that down to, I'm going to say, in the range of $180,000 savings net to the city of Dawson Creek. So instead of 1.65, you would pay $180,000 roughly, less than that at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Parzal.
Well, I'd first like to unpack what Mayor's just said about the utilities. So just want to make sure I understand that, because that would be a little bit of a revelation for me, which I appreciate knowing. So the 1.6, 1.5, the utilities get paid out of that. The proportion that the event center has to pay of utilities comes out of that 1.6?
It would come out of the overall operating budget, of which we contribute 1.65 as a fee for service. So if the operating budget is 3 million and those numbers are packaged in that, it's paid out of the operating budget, but of which we contribute 1.65 million in a fee for service for.
Yeah. So let's talk about, obviously, from my point of view, from my perspective, I don't think this is a balanced agreement. From the point of view, it seems that the city assumes all the risk, and so I would hope that when we, if there's a consideration for continuing our relationship and after 2027, we can seek a more balanced contract in a few areas that we know of are problematic. But let's take catering as an example, if I may. I don't wish to get into the details of it, but is there, and going into the future, thinking down the road, is there an option for a local restaurant to bid on providing all the catering? I mean, it may not be feasible. I'm just talking theoretically, right? Is it possible?
Upon the expiration of the present agreement?
Yes.
And not the management, but I'm talking the catering agreement and the food services, yes, that would be open. It's my understanding back when this was entered into, there was a reach out at that time. And again, I'm believing this is somewhat specialized, no expert in the field, but yes. And it would be strictly up to mayor and council at the time, upon expiration of any of the agreements. They're tied together, 2027 I'll use. At that time, prior to the expiration of this agreement, I think it would be healthy for mayor and council to have a discussion. What has worked in the agreement, what hasn't? Are we going back out? Would we like to look at a renewal, for example, with our existing service provider? Would we go back out for a completely new request for proposals? That will be a decision of mayor and council at the time.
So another thing I don't understand, and I'm not saying you understand it perfectly either, because it is complex, but advertising, there's a budget that's presented to city by Spectra, and presumably they've made an estimation on revenue from advertising, and boxes, let's say, and that because of circumstances is less. What impact does that drop in revenue have, if any, on the management fee the city must pay? Are we on the hook for that drop in revenue?
Through you, your worship, there is the potential that as we look, and I would look to Flavia to correct me if I step off base here, but our $1.65 million fee for service is what we have agreed to as a city to contribute. Encana or Global Spectrum puts their budget together based on we're going to realize X revenue from whether it be events, concerts, rents, everybody that uses it, as well as the sale of the suites. For example, there is opportunities for seating purchases as well. If that revenue is not realized that they have projected, there is the possibility that the $1.65 million could go up. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And
So-
what section of this contract, as I was looking for that, is it, what's giving you that sort of opinion from the contract?
The opinion I received from the legal counsel when we were
Okay.
speaking about this. Also, when you read through, I believe you can go all the way through the commercial rights section. I would have to go into some detail here, your worship.
So I'm gonna
That's fair
jump in.
enough, yeah.
I'm gonna jump in because we're starting to put some speculation into some stuff here about a contract, and now when we start to talk about a legal opinion, that should probably be better not talked about in public, because it is potentially impacting a contract that we have. I'm good to have the overview of the contract, but when we start to speculate about components around what may or may not impact us, and then that impacts potentially the contract or the legal interpretation, I think we're in a position here that we should probably, today's was about an opportunity for the CAO to give us an overview of that management agreement. I just want to make sure that we don't start straying into an area that all of a sudden we start talking about potential legal implications that may impact that agreement that we have.
Fair comment, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Earl.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Blair, for the overview. I guess of everyone here, I might be a little bit more familiar with some of the deal points in here than some of the other councillors. And while I do maintain that the folks at the event center work very hard and take a great deal of pride in their work, I think this pandemic has certainly laid bare some of the shortcomings in this agreement. And certainly whoever occupies these seats in 2027 when this agreement's up for consideration, my hope is that they would take some things into consideration. Number one, I think a 10-year agreement is a pretty long timeline for anything. I think, the first 10 years of operation when the dollar was at 85 to 90 cents on the US dollar, and we didn't have a pandemic, a lot of these shortcomings in the agreement were easy to gloss over, easy to ignore. But as Councillor Parslow mentioned, the one thing that does baffle me, and I have to admit, when people used to ask me when I worked there about the event center and how that works with the city, I used to describe it as essentially, for the ease of having it make sense to the general public or lay people, as a municipal crown corporation for all intents and purposes. Because although Spectra, which is owned by Comcast, is technically a business, there certainly isn't a great deal of risk in this contract for them. Basically, it's we share the upside, and we as a city own the downside, and we do need to look at a more equitable contract moving forward. But I won't go into any real details, as his worship said. It's not really a time and place for it. I just wanted to thank Blair for the overview and reiterate what some of Councillor Parslow mentioned.
Thank you. Further comments, further questions? Councillor Parslow?
Yeah, Section 4.3, Blair, if you can come up with a one-sentence explanation of Section 4.3, I would be deeply indebted to you. Thank you.
One sentence.
I don't expect a response.
It is, again, part of the formula, Your Worship, that's in here. It's the commercial rights fee portion that speaks that it will be equal to 15% of the portion of revenue from the sale of commercial rights, including without limitation from the sale of the outdoor marquee. It is another opportunity that they and the city would share in some things, but they would realize this. I will point out, Your Worship, whether a person looks at this agreement and agrees with it or doesn't agree with it, any dealings, it is a signed agreement between the City of Dawson Creek and Global Spectrum. We will honor our agreements as a city and as we always have. Any dealings I have had with the operators, whether it be Dustin or locally, or Dean, or Ryan, or the people in Philadelphia, I will say that the discussions we've had have always been respectful and ones where they will share the information that they have as we have. So, again, it doesn't go to the issue of do we agree with each clause, but the work we've done together has been very professional, and I want to say, I'll take this time to say thank you, particularly to Dustin, who runs it, Ryan, who most recently left here, and Dean are the closest contacts I have on this agreement. But never once have they not answered a question or gone to work to get the information we needed. So,
Thank you. Yeah, the residents in the Peace region in ED and Pooskoopi and Dawson Creek went to a referendum and voted to have an event center. And we clearly don't have the expertise to operate an event center, and so this council, the majority of this council, renegotiated an agreement that was put in place 10 years ago, and majority of this council renegotiated that agreement in 2017, and we have a 10-year agreement, and we benefited immensely in lots of ways with it. But it's to me, it's a contract, and you don't you don't get everything you want, and you don't give everything you want, but it is the agreement we have, and to me, our community was benefited big time from it. So yeah, we're gonna always look to push the bar higher, and that's part of how we move it forward. Thank you, Blair. So anything further under open? So I do have one item I should have started the meeting out with, and we received some really sad news on the weekend that our previous mayor, Bill Coos, passed away last week on Thursday or Friday and had been battling serious cancer. Blair and I started with Bill on council in 1993. We got elected for our first time, and Bill was the mayor. And so it's with sadness we hear the news about Bill passing away, and want to extend our heartfelt, deepest condolences to family and friends, because he was a really, really passionate guy about our community, and so it's with sadness we heard that he'd been battling cancer and lost the battle on, I think, Thursday or Friday. So with that, on that sad note, we'll call for a motion to adjourn open, and we're going to recess to closed. We have a couple of items in closed under agenda items 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 4.1 are minutes. 6.1, we have Section 91 regarding the Peace River Regional District. And then item 7.1 is regarding an offer to purchase under Section 91 that we need to go into closed. So if I can have a motion, Councillor Wilbur, second, Councillor Kemp, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And we'll take 7 minutes to allow Carl to pull out his equipment.